Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Ibrahim Bittar, and in this session, we are going to talk about integration. As you may have noticed, the whole innovation track in this conference has been about integration. We have been talking about JSON, curl, APIs, and so on. But in a nutshell, what is integration? Okay, in my own words, integration is having one application talking to other one. In our case, we have a FileMaker Solution that talks to a web app and tells, hey, you do something for me. And that web app gives us a response. That response may be the thing that we are asking or a message error message, sorry. So what can we do with integration? Basically, we can connect our solution with virtually anything. There are hundreds of applications that support integration. We can do calendars, accounting solution like QuickBooks, for example, project managers, which, by the way, is what we are going to do in this session. Part of the things we have to do as speakers is to tell you a little bit about ourselves and explain why we are who we are and why we are qualified to be here. I wanted to take a step further and tell you what I am. This is my father, Ibrahim. He came from Lebanon, and he was a terrific mechanical engineer and gunsmith. From him, I took my love for precision and alignment. This is my mom, Ofelia. She's Venezuelan. I was born in Venezuela. She is an artist, painter, musician, singer, and most of the people on her family have to do something with music. Now, what happens when you put together engineering and arts? Well, what you get is a designer. I like to believe that I am a designer by DNA. Now, professionally speaking, who I am. I've been 27 years in the graphic arts industry. In 1990, I was one of the first people in Venezuela who sold computers to print shops, basically Macs and laser printers that were substituting the old big equipment at that time. In 1993, I started my own graphic design studio, and it was my first contact with FileMaker 1. I created a quoting solution to make my own quotes. Then in 1997, I was hired as the tech support manager of the largest Apple retailer in Venezuela. They had a solution written in FileMaker 3 where they kept track of all the tech support tickets. I used that solution. I had to give some maintenance to it. Then in year 2000, I was invited to go to Mexico and set up a large digital printing plant. I was the production manager, and during that time, I wrote a solution to keep track of job orders and quotes. Then in 2001, along with my wife, Tere, we founded Aconsys until today. And basically, what we do is to sell a product based on FileMaker Pro. We have an ERP aimed to the graphic arts industry. We cover sales, production, and accounting, all in one single big tool. In 2004, we were the first company in Latin America to join the FBA. In 2006, this was my first time as a speaker. And if I recall correctly, this is my 5th time. I am honored and happy to be here and thankful for you to be in here with me this time. What things I like in a more personal side of things? Well, I like to eat. You can tell. And therefore, I like to cook. I am a pretty decent cook, and I have, along with my son, Ibrahim Jr., I have a small channel on Facebook where we cook together. And it's called Ibrahim por dos, Ibrahim by 2. Well, what we are going to do today? We are going to talk about integration. But in order to understand what integration is, we need to first understand the building blocks of integration. Imagine we are putting together the pieces of a bike. I need to describe each piece one by one, and then we are going to put it together, okay? And hopefully we can ride that bike, okay? So this is basically what we are going to do today. This is our agenda. The first part, where I'll explain the building blocks of integration, API, REST, OAuth, and so on. And we will cover a step-by-step process to integrate a FileMaker solution with a web app. I hoped to take the first 20 minutes on this part. This will be slides. I will try to move a bit fast so we can make more room for demo, which will be the second part of this session, where I'm going to show you a sample solution that is already integrated with our project manager. I will take 30 minutes on it. And then the last part will be Q&A the next 10 minutes. So let's start with the beginning. Application program. I think someone had too much copy. Yeah, that's my computer. Oh, that's a small joke. I know, I know this is the last segment of DevCon. Most of you must be tired, and you have seen a lot of content until today. So I will try for this session to keep things simple. So instead of showing you long slides with long definitions, how about this? This is what I think is an API. An API is the guy in red in between of our FileMaker solution and our web app, okay? It's kind of a translator or an interpreter. He listens what the FileMaker solution wants and tells the web app what they need in their language, most of it. So if we put it in a concept, an API is the middleman that takes your request and gives you a response. The keywords here are request and response. Let's take an example. For example, this is an API call to Twitter. It's a long line of text, but if we split it on parts, we can see it has different parts. The first one is the URL, which is api.twitter.com, and then we have /1.1/. That is what we call an endpoint. Well, sorry, the URL it ends on 1.1, and then we have search/tweets.json. This is what we call the endpoint. And then we have the parameter. The parameter usually is separated by a question mark. So basically what this API call is saying is, hey, Twitter, give me all posts that have the word burritos, which language is in English, and give me the first 100 of them, okay? So this is what we are telling Twitter with this API call. Now, this is a little bit harder to explain. Representational state transfer, its acronym is REST. And basically, it's a number of rules or constraints that a server must have in order to be called a RESTful server. Keywords are rules, of course, interoperability between two computer systems. Now, the constraints of REST are, the first one is representational. It means that when we make contact with a RESTful server, the response is not the data itself, but a representation of it. If I make a request to a RESTful server, I don't get the database in response. I get a representation of that database. For example, I have our FileMaker solution and our web app solution. And the other constraint is statelessness. Sorry for my bad language, bad English. And statelessness means that nothing of the client-side information is retained on the server side. This means that we can make a request to the server and get a response, and nothing of our information remains on the server. We don't have session information stored on the server. Cacheable. Sometimes we make many requests to a server, and those requests and those responses can be cached in the middle, okay? And this will help us to improve speed. On demand means that we can download code from the server. For one example of that is, who remembers FileMaker 9, 10, 11, FileMaker server? Do you remember we logged into a web page and then we downloaded a Java applet that actually was the admin console? Well, most of it is a good example of what is on demand. Then layered means that not always we have direct contact with the final server. We can have servers in between that help us to divide, to offload the workload, the final server. We can have different servers, we can have one, or we can have many servers in between. And this one, uniform interface, I'm going to explain it in the next slide. Uniform interface means that we have a resource. REST is based on resources. Give me that name. For example, bring me all records with name Diego, for example. That's a resource. They have a name. And we transport this resource using HTTP in our case. And then we have manipulation. Manipulation means what we want the server to do with our request. In our case, for example, we can get information from our server. Self-descriptive means that the response from server must be human readable, much more like an XML file or a JSON file. And well, this concept is long to explain, but it's short to understand. Basically, hate OAuth is hyperlinks as a way of communication. I don't remember exactly what the acronym, it's a long acronym, but basically what it says is that you need to use a hypertext protocol to communicate with your server. So a RESTful API is one that complies with all those rules or constraints. Let me show you an example. We have, again, a FileMaker Solution, a web app, and we have a resource, have a transfer protocol, tell it, manipulate the information on the server, and then we get a response which is self-descriptive. For example, we have an endpoint, which is called API/projects. We have a HTTP call, okay? And we tell it, get that project information. And the response, what we have is human readable. In our case, this is a JSON file saying FileMaker is not allowed. Now, Open Authorization Protocol. Its acronym is OAuth. And it's used for authorization. It's an open standard that we use to get authorization from a web app. Keywords here are open standard, authorization, which is very important, and it's basically, or most of the time, over the internet. OAuth is not an authentication protocol, okay? It's an authorization protocol. There is a difference. Authentication is who you are, and authorization is what you can do. Think of your DevCon badge, okay? It has your name on it. So in order to get into these rooms, you need to have a badge saying that you are who you say you are. That's authentication. In my case, my badge on the bottom says FBA. That means that I am authorized to attend tomorrow for the events on the FBA day. Also, I have a red ribbon down here says speaker. It means I can be here speaking to you, okay? Not everyone have the same authorization that my badge has, okay? So in this case, authentication is your name. You say who you say you are, and authorization is, for example, FBA and a speaker. That could be a good example. There are two versions of OAuth, 1 and 2. On version 1, there is no support for non-browser apps, so it doesn't work with FileMaker directly. OAuth 2, it supports non-browser apps. OAuth 1 is harder to use versus OAuth 2. It's more secure because it requires encryption or cryptography, and OAuth 2 doesn't require it. And the token, the access token we get on version 1 is usually for a year or so, and in version 2, it may last an hour. So the duration of the token is different. Now, in order to get access to a server using OAuth, there are basically these methods: authorization code, implicit grant access, password credentials, client credentials. In this session, I'm going to show you the first two, authorization code and implicit. When we have an authorization code grant access, it is optimized for, It is optimized for confidential clients. It means private computers. We are not using a public computer like an internet coffee or so. It requires user interaction because we have to manually type our username and password, which is the authentication side. It can receive incoming requests from the client, and it provides you an access token and a refresh token. We have an access token that most of the time it lasts for an hour, and then we can issue a call to the server with our refresh token to get a new one, which will last for another hour. Most of the time, what we need to do with the server, an hour is more than enough. So most of the time, we don't need to refresh our token, but if you need, you have one. Step by step, we log into our solution. We create an app, and when we create an app, we have to, they give us two values that are client secret and the access key or token, access token. When we are going to connect to the solution, we need to authenticate, which is to put our username and password. We are redirected to a website which we add, and in the URL of this redirection, there is a parameter that is our access token. We will see it later. I'm trying to go a bit fast on this because I am going to show you with an example. And basically, with this redirection, we get our access token. For example, we have this long URL, and we pass as a parameter our client ID, and we say here, if you see the red dot here, we say code because we are using authorization code. So in the parameter response type, we are using code, which means that we are using the authorization code grant, and we have a redirect URL, which is this one. Then we authenticate. We go to this URL, and we have to type our username and password. And then we are redirected to this URL. And as you see, there is a parameter called code, and this random code is given to us by the server. So we use this code as a token, as a token access. It's, get a token to obtain another token. When we use this random code along with the other value, which is client secret, we get our token as. This is the server response. So we have a JSON file, which has the actual access token we are going to use to make calls to our solution. the expiration time, which is in seconds. This is 3,600 seconds, an hour. Token type is better, and this is our refresh token in case we need it. The implicit grant is a bit shorter, but it requires you to have full control of your browser. So for FileMaker applications, maybe it may work if you are working on a web viewer or if you are writing a JavaScript solution that will run entirely on your browser. It's much better to use implicit grant. It's a one-step process. You send a URL and you get a response. You need, as I said, full control of your browser, and may or may not have a refresh token. It depends on the API you are connecting to. Let me show you step by step. You log in, authenticate, you get redirected. For example, again, see now the response type is token. Authenticate, use the same URL to authenticate, and the response we get on our browser, as you see, is a complete URL, and we have a number of parameters that are embedded on the URL. So if we don't have control of our browser, it will be hard to parse all this information. So if we have a web viewer, we can grab the source of the web viewer and then parse this information. For me, it's easier to use the implicit, the authorization code grant. Now, JavaScript object notation, its acronym is JSON. And the keywords here are standard, open standard, and human readable. And the data is structured like an XML file. We have a JSON object, and it has some parts. One of these is the key, which is the equivalent to the field name, okay, or the attribute name if we are going to compare it to an XML file. This is an attribute. Then the value, and the combination of two is what we call a key value pair. Okay, we can have different types of key value pairs. We have arrays, which are zero-based, and this is really important. I will slow down a little bit here because this is important. Zero-based means that the first value of a JSON array has the index equals to 0. I mean, if you are going to grab the first value of a JSON array, the index you need to use is 0. This means a zero-based array. Boolean means you have a true or false value. Check that when you use true or false, you don't use quotes here. It's only the word true or false. We have numbers. They don't need also quotes here. And we have objects. We can have nested objects in a JSON element. So we can have JSON inside of JSON. Strings, now we need quotes in both the key and the value, okay, see? And we have in FileMaker 16 a number of new functions that help us to deal with JSON objects. The most important are JSON Get Element and JSON Set Element. JSON Get Element, we use it to grab information from a JSON object. We have, for example, this JSON object, and we have values, which is here, okay? And values is the key for this complete value here, and it's an object, another JSON object. And then we have expires in. So we have a path to get to this value, which is 3,600. Now, in FileMaker 16, we use myJSON, which is the whole JSON object. And then we use this path, values that expires underscore in. It means I type the first key and then a dot, and then the second key, and so on until I get to the object I want to grab from this JSON element. Set element, it is the opposite. It helps me to create new JSON objects inside FileMaker. So I have, for example, this calculation, and the result is this. It is basically the opposite. We have these expressions inside brackets that help us to create this one. When we use JSON Set Element, this is kind of a tricky function. It needs some testing before releasing it in a solution, so be careful with this. You need to test that the results are exactly what you want, okay? These JSON string and JSON number are the type of key value that you are trying to create here. So it is important for you to read the documentation, do a lot of testing before rolling out this function in a solution. Now, command URL, this is another block here. It stands for curl. And we use it to transfer information from our client to the server. It doesn't require user interaction. The keywords here are transfer data and without user interaction. Basically, we send the request, usually over terminal or from our FileMaker solution, and get a response from the server. For example, we have, oops. Again? Okay. Now my computer had, okay. Don't move. Stop right there. Okay, this is a curl request. If you take it, if you see it at first sight, it may be a bit overwhelming. You know, it's a long line of text with many information, with many pieces of information here. But let's split it in its parts so we can understand it better. The first part is basically the command, which is curl, and all these parameters that we are sending to our URL, which is here, and this is the endpoint. Okay, so basically we take a URL, take an endpoint, and send a number of parameters. In this example that I'm showing you, we have a number of parameters, -b, -x, h, and d. Let's explain one by one. B means verbose. It means that we use for debugging the response, when we get the response from server, it explains much more than when we don't use it. Basically, it's we use verbose when we want to debug our request and know exactly what is going on. Then -x means the type of request that we're doing to our server. There are basically 4 types. Post, which we use to create records on the server. Get, we use it to read or to get a record. Put, we use it to update records. And delete, well, its name explains itself, is to delete. And this acronym is CRUD. So when you read in a documentation this acronym CRUD, it means that you can do these 4 things. Header is an extra information we send to the request. Usually we use it for authentication purposes or to tell the server the type of information we are sending to it, sorry. For example, content type, we are telling the server that the data we are going to send is a JSON file, and this is our access token that we received earlier. So these are the 2 headers we are sending in this curl request. And finally, -d or data, which means the information we are posting or we are sending to the server. In this case, it's a JSON object called network, which has a value of another JSON object called Jerome's network. Now, how it works in FileMaker. In FileMaker, we have a script step called insert from URL, and it is for using curl in FileMaker. In the target, we put the result of the URL. It can be put in a field or in a variable. Then we put the URL plus the endpoint, and finally the parameters or the curl options. Okay, I put it together. I feel like, have you seen those cooking videos that make a whole meal in 10 seconds? Yeah, I feel a bit like that. So we covered briefly API, REST, OAuth, JSON, and curl. So now it's time to write. Let me show you a demonstration. I had this plan B in case the internet fails, I had a video just in case. Okay, we have a FileMaker solution. Oops. Okay, better. I have this FileMaker solution, which, by the way, you can download from the community site on the session materials section. For this session, this file is available for download. We are going to integrate our FileMaker solution with a with a project manager called Productive, which is here. Okay, Productive is a software made by the people of Jive, the same people who makes the community manager, so the community software we use in FileMaker. Now we can create projects in here. We have a concept called networks, which we use to create groups of people inside our organization. And you can create projects, and inside those projects, we can create tasks. These tasks can be in process or done or waiting to be done. So what we do, we create an account here. If we go to our FileMaker solution, our first step is go to this URL and create a Productive account, which I already did here. And the second step is going to create a new app. We go to productive.com/settings/apps and create a new application. I already have this one. I will delete it and create it again for you so you can see. Okay, I create a new application, and I put the name of the client. In this case, for example, I also DevCon, and this is a sample solution. The URL I'm going to use is this one, aconsys.com, and the redirect URL is this one. I created a small PHP file, and basically in this redirect URL is where we are going to get the token, the response from the server. We can also upload an icon. I have this small icon here, okay? And I create the solution. That's it. If you see here, when we create a sample solution, we get a client ID, a client secret, and this is our redirect URL. Now, let's put these parameters in our FileMaker solution. We type here the client ID and paste the client secret. Okay? And I already have the redirect URL. Now, we're going to take a token. We click here and we get a new card window in FileMaker 16. And hopefully, okay, I have to log in into my solution. Oops. Once we click on sign in, we get a response from server with the authorization. Okay, sorry, the server is asking me if I am willing to authorize this app to get information. I say yes. And this is the token I get, see? Now, if I click here on get, this is a web viewer inside FileMaker. When I click here on get, basically I am taking the URL response from the server and I am parsing the API token and putting in this field. I'm going to show you this step by step. We're going to use the script debugger to run this step by step. Now I am only describing the process. Now we can get networks. I can click here, get all networks. Now I have DevCon demo. As you can see, is here we have DevCon demo. We can update the name here. For example, I click save. And if I refresh my website here, you see, it's refreshed here. The name has changed. Now I can invite people to join on this network. In this case, I'm going to invite myself. Oops. I'm going to use this network, and I'm going to be an admin. And this is the part where I say I better get the video. Okay, just give me 1 second, please. No, sorry. Okay, let's see. Click save. Okay, it seems I am already there. And we can create a project. For example, in this case, I'm going to create a project which is called, this is a test. And the description is testing on this network. It won't be locked and it won't be restricted. I click save. And if I refresh here, fingers crossed. Okay, this is my project. It's already here. And I also can create tasks. For example, for this project, I can add a new task, which is called task 1. I can create another one, task 2. And if I refresh here, I got my 2 tasks on the website. On this place, I can mark them as done. I already did them. And if I refresh here, you can see it's already refreshed on my FileMaker solution. We can also take a task and add a note and upload a file. For example, this is my sample note. And I'm going to drag here a file. For example, this FM logo. Okay, I click save. Okay, and I can add a description. Sorry, this is a sample file. And if I go to task 1, if I click on task 1, here is my sample node, and this is my file. Okay, I can download the file, I can see it online. So basically, the integration is have my FileMaker solution talk to the web app, and we can exchange information from one side to other side. Now, let's do this step by step. I think we have time enough. We have another 10 minutes before going into Q&A. So when we create a new app, we manually add this information. Now, let's see how we get a token. Let's open the script debugger here, and I will click on go to URL. I am loading a web viewer, and I am using, in this solution, I am using two possible solutions, the authorization code and the implicit grant. So for this example, let's use authorization code. I click on go to URL, and this is the first parameter, authorization code. I create a new card style window here, there. And this window contains a web viewer. And we are setting the web viewer through this field. Okay, now I have to sign in. Type my password. Oops. Click on sign in. Click on allow. Okay. Now, the server has given me an access token. And if I click on get, now see what happens here. Let me open the script for you so you can see the calculation. Put this down here for a moment. Okay, and this is the calculation. Can you see it at the back of the room? At the back of the room, can you read it? Okay. So basically, what we are doing is to substitute the question mark, which is the parameter on our URL, the response we got from server. We change it and add a record, a return, a carriage return here, and then we grab the second value of this list. This is our access token. Everything that comes after the question mark on our URL is the access token. Then we use insert from URL here. Let me show you. We are putting the result of this request on this global variable called token_JSON. The URL we are calling is this one. We are sending our client ID, our client secret, and remember the example I showed you? I told you when we were using OAuth to say that the grant type was authorization code, and this is our redirect URI, and the authorization code we just got, which is our token. And with the response from server, I'm using JSON Get Element here. Okay, I take the response from server and grab the value called access token, and so on for the refresh token, the duration, and the expiry date. Okay, and then I close my window. So, let's see. I get the authorization code. I send the request from server to the server. Here is my response. Okay. Okay, my authorization code has expired. Let me try it again. Well, let's see the error. Okay. Okay, as you can see, I didn't take anything here. Okay, so let me try it again. I create a new window. Oops, I'm sorry. I sign in. Allow, and immediately I click get in order to get my API token. There was no error this time, and here we go. This is our API token. If I go to the data viewer, this is our token response, okay? Let me show it in a JSON Editor tool I have here. It's Oxygen XML. It works for XML files and JSON as well. Give me 1 second. Create a new file here. It's a JSON file. Paste and give some shape. Here we go. Okay, as you can see, we have a JSON file with this value and with this key, sorry, and this value, and we grab it. We parse this information using JSON Get Element. Next, we get all networks. It is basically the same process. I click here, and I insert from URL. Let's see the script, how it works. We put the result in a variable called, local variable called response. This is the URL, and this is they are the options. In this case, I am only sending a header with my API token in order to get authorization to grab this information. Okay, don't save. Let's keep running this. Go to server, then total hits tells me the number of networks available. In this case, it's only one. Freeze window, I'll go to a service layout I have here, show all records, delete them, and then I loop from my response and create all networks again. When I'm going to update the network name, I click here and say, for example, update it, and click on save. Okay, we call, let me show you. We're putting the result of this call in a global variable called response. This is the URL. In this case, I'm specifying specifically a network ID because I am updating. And in this case, let me show you this a little bit bigger type. Okay, I'm using JSON Set Element to create a JSON object. This is the data I'm putting into the curl request. And in this case, I am using put. This function was created by Wim de Korte. He created a number of custom functions to facilitate, to ease the process of communicating with a curl, to create a curl request. All these custom functions are available into this sample solution. And basically, we create the request, we create our headers, and then our data. Okay, let's close this. And the response we got from server was okay. It was okay. I had the new ID, and it basically this response is telling me everything went okay. So I again get all networks, and I am done. If I click refresh here, if I refresh my website, and I click on networks, now you have DevCon updated. The same for inviting people. I create a record in this portal, and when I click on save, in this case, we have two options. We are creating a new one, or we can update an existing record, okay? I'm not changing this part of I'm not changing this record because I had a little bit of trouble now, so previously, so I don't want to mess with this part now. When we are creating a project, it is the same process here. I create a new project, test2. This is a test on these networks, not locked and not restricted. Again, script debugger, click on save, and let's see what happens. I use insert for, oops, sorry, I canceled the script. Let me show you. Okay, again, the results go to this global variable. This is my endpoint, API / projects, and these are my options. I am creating here in the data I'm sending, I'm using JSON Set Element to create a JSON object that contains all these key value pairs, and posting the information. It means I am creating a new record. I'm telling the server the data I'm sending is on JSON format. This is my authorization token, and this is the data I created here. So basically, it is pretty much the same process for everything. When I click save, I got my second project here. If I refresh, okay, I got test2 and so on and on and on. Okay, so this is pretty much the process, okay? I have one final thought for this. Let me get back to my keynote. I have a final thought for this. Be careful. It may look simple in this demonstration, but actually it is not. Not every API delivers what they promise, okay? So you have to be very careful. Read thoroughly the API documentation. Not every API have a good documentation. Most of them tells you only 20% of what you need to know, okay? So be careful. If you are requested from a customer to integrate your actual solution with something else, before saying yes, okay, I suggest you to do some research, take a look at the API, check on the documentation, and do some tests. If you can do it, then say yes. If you don't, you have a high risk of having this kind of difficult conversation with the customer when you say, guess what? So you don't want to have this kind of conversation with your customer. So be careful, read all the documentation. For example, in this case, let me show you, I have the API documentation. Most of the documentation comes in this format. You see here the word get. This is the type of request we are going to need. And this is my endpoint. And then, depending on the documentation, you will have a curl example here and the sample response, okay? So I suggest you do some research, read the documentation, create a test bed file so you can test one by one. Each one of those endpoints, test them one by one. And if you are able to use it and you feel confident that you can make the integration, then say yes to your customer, not before, okay? Okay, from my part, basically this is it. We are entering now in the Q&A session. This is the Q&A part of this session. Don't we have a microphone for the people who is asking? People at the back? Sorry, do we have a microphone? Oh, if someone has a question, please use the microphone. This session is being recorded. I have a severe case of tinnitus, you know, ringing ears, so if you are going to use the microphone, please speak a little bit slower than usual so I can understand what you're saying. If there are no questions, well, this is it. A question? Yes?
Yes. I say it loud, so it gets recorded, okay?
Okay.
In this case, do you have to get the token every time you want to modify something in your demo? You need to, because I saw you had to log in with your credentials.
Okay, he's asking if I need to get an access token every time I'm doing something. No. When I get an access token, it lasts for an hour, okay? So if I am going to do something that takes more than an hour, I can use my refresh token, okay? And it lasts an hour in this specific case, okay? Depending on the service you are connecting to, you can have an hour, a week, or a year. Okay, it depends.
Okay.
Anyone else? Yes?
Do you have a PHP file in?
Yes, I made a small PHP file which basically grabs what's in on the URL part of the response, of the server's response. But if you're using a web viewer, you can use the get a layout, get the web viewer attribute called source, and you can parse the access token from it. Okay. Well, this is it. Thank you very much. I hope you liked it. Thank you. Please remember, last but not least, I want to thank these people for helping me win the Corte for his custom functions. John Renfrew and Todd Geist for helping me to use the JSON Set Element function, and my friend Mark Baum for helping me to make this presentation 10 times better than it was. Thank you so much to them. It will not have updates, and please don't forget to add your evaluation. It is important for all of us, especially for me. And this is it. Thank you.